Look at your phone. Look at the people around you in the office, the bar, or even your own home. They don't see you. To them, you are a tool of convenience, a background character in their own story, or worse, a ghost. You are being ignored because you have no presence. You lack the psychological weight that forces a room to tilt in your direction. You are playing checkers in a world where men like Thomas Shelby have already mastered the board. He doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't raise his voice to be heard. He simply exists, and the world bends. Today, we strip away the nice guy facade that has kept you trapped in the cycle of being overlooked and undervalued. I will show you how to cultivate an aura so heavy that your silence becomes your loudest weapon. You won't just ask for respect, you will collect it like a debt that is long overdue. What Thomas Shelby mastered in the industrial smoke of Birmingham, Niccolò Machiavelli codified in the ruthless courts of Renaissance Florence. Power is not granted by merit or kindness. It is projected through strategic perception and the cold management of how others see you. This is not a lesson for the weak-willed. This is an architecture of sovereignty. Before we begin the descent into the dark psychology of respect, prove you have the stomach for the truth. Comment "I am the chess player" if you have finished being a pawn in someone else's game. Subscribe to claim your seat at the table. The game is about to change. To command respect, you must first understand the absolute sovereignty of silence. In the modern world, noise is cheap. Everyone is screaming for validation, posting for likes, and filling every awkward gap in conversation with meaningless chatter. This is the mark of the prey. The predator, however, understands that information is the only currency that matters, and silence is the vault that protects it. When you speak less than necessary, you appear more powerful, more mysterious, and infinitely more dangerous. You create a psychological vacuum that others feel an irresistible urge to fill. And when they fill that void, they give away their secrets, their insecurities, and their leverage. Thomas Shelby is the high priest of this quiet temple. He understands that every word uttered is a potential vulnerability exposed. Consider the moment Thomas Shelby sits in his office, the air thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and the lingering dampness of Birmingham rain, waiting for Luca Changretta. Luca enters like a theatrical storm, Italian silk, gold rings, and the heavy arrogance of the New York mafia. He paces, he talks, he snaps a toothpick between his teeth. He is trying to dominate the space with movement and sound. And Tommy? Tommy remains seated. He is a statue carved from cold coal. He says almost nothing. He watches Luca with eyes that have seen the literal pits of hell in the trenches of France. By refusing to meet Luca's energetic outbursts with his own, Tommy creates a terrifying disparity in status. He forces a high-ranking mafia boss to perform for him. In that office, the silence isn't just a lack of sound, it is an active force. It is a suffocating weight that makes Luca's bravado look like the desperate twitching of a man who knows he's being measured and found wanting. Tommy is practicing what we call the strategic void. He knows that by staying silent, he is making Luca the one who has to justify his presence. This isn't just a cinematic trick, it is the ultimate Machiavellian maneuver. In the 18th chapter of The Prince, Machiavelli explains that a leader must be a great feigner and dissembler. He must manage the perception of his subjects with calculated precision. Machiavelli knew that the masses are always taken by appearances and by the outcome of an event. When you are silent, you are managing your appearance as a man of depth and hidden reserves. You are feigning a level of control that most men can only dream of. A prince who talks too much eventually says something foolish or revealing. A prince who remains silent is a mystery that cannot be solved, and what cannot be solved cannot be defeated. Machiavelli would argue that Tommy's silence in the face of the Black Hand is his most effective armor. It makes him appear as a lion who is merely amused by the barking of a dog. It signals that nothing Luca says or does can penetrate the inner sanctum of Tommy's strategic mind. This is sovereignty in its purest form. The refusal to be moved by the external world. The internal psychology of Thomas Shelby in these moments is a masterclass in emotional containment. He isn't just not talking. He is actively observing the micro-expressions, the tone, and the physical tells of his opponent. While the common man is busy thinking about what he wants to say next to look smart, Tommy is busy listening to what his opponent is accidentally revealing through their desperation to fill the silence. He has detached his ego from the conversation. He doesn't care if Luca thinks he is quiet or boring. He only cares about the data. He is a predator waiting for the prey to step into the clearing. This level of focus requires a complete lack of social anxiety, a trait you must develop if you want to be a Shelby. You must become comfortable with the discomfort of others. When someone speaks to you and you offer no immediate reaction, their brain begins to short-circuit. They begin to wonder if they said something wrong, if you know something they don't, or if you are simply unimpressed. That doubt is where your power resides. In the modern Xadrez social, or social chess, you apply the sovereignty of silence to dismantle the hierarchies that try to keep you down. Imagine you are in a high-stakes negotiation or a confrontation with a supervisor who is trying to steamroll you. The common man reacts immediately. He defends himself, he explains, he gets defensive. He loses. You, however, will use the 3-second rule. When someone finishes speaking, especially if they have just insulted you or made a demand, you will look them directly in the eyes and count to 3 in your head. Do not blink. Do not fidget. Just wait. In those 3 seconds, the power dynamic shifts entirely. The other person will almost always begin to backtrack or add more information to ease the tension you've created. They will offer concessions you didn't even ask for. They will perceive you as someone who is deeply centered and potentially dangerous because you are not reactive. In your relationships, stop over-explaining your actions. When you are questioned, give a short, direct answer and stop talking. Let the silence do the work. The more you explain, the more you look like a subject answering to a master. The less you say, the more you look like a sovereign who is simply stating a fact. Respect is not won through the quality of your arguments. It is won through the strength of your presence. And nothing commands presence like the absolute refusal to speak until the world is ready to listen. This is the dark psychology of the silence, the first secret to the Shelby crown. The second pillar of commanding respect is the mastery of your own internal landscape, or what I call the mask of calculated coldness. In the high-stakes theater of social interaction, your face is either a shield or a target. Most men walk through life with their emotions written in bold ink across their brows. They smile when they are nervous, they scowl when they are offended, and they leak anxiety through every micro-expression. This makes them predictable. And in the eyes of a strategist, predictability is a death sentence. To command respect like Thomas Shelby, you must adopt the philosophy that emotions are not just personal experiences. They are strategic liabilities. You must learn to treat your feelings as a luxury you cannot afford in the presence of others. When you master the mask, you become an unreadable map, a void that reflects nothing back to the enemy but their own mounting insecurity. Recall the volatile confrontation between Thomas Shelby and the chaotic genius Alfie Solomons in the dark, salt-stained rooms of Camden Town. Alfie is a man of fire and fury. He uses noise, threats, and erratic movements to destabilize his opponents. In this specific exchange, Alfie is screaming, accusing Tommy of crossing the line and betraying the sacred trust of their unspoken brotherhood. He is inches from Tommy's face, his voice a gravelly roar, his eyes wide with a calculated madness. Any other man would have flinched, shouted back, or reached for a weapon in a panicked reflex. But look at Tommy. He sits there, a cigarette burning slowly between his fingers, his pulse likely slower than the clock on the wall. His face is a frozen lake. He doesn't offer a single twitch of fear or even the satisfaction of anger. He understands that Alfie is trying to find a crack in the armor, a sign of guilt or hesitation. By remaining cold, by maintaining that absolute, terrifying stillness, Tommy makes Alfie's heat look like weakness. He transforms Alfie's outburst into a performance for which Tommy is the only unimpressed judge. This is the dead-eye strategy. The realization that if you do not react, the other person's aggression has nowhere to land. It simply dissipates, leaving them feeling foolish and overexposed. This coldness is the practical application of Machiavelli's most famous dictate, that it is much safer to be feared than loved. In the 17th chapter of The Prince, Machiavelli argues that love is held by a chain of obligation, which, because men are selfish, is broken whenever it serves their purpose. But fear is maintained by a dread of punishment, which never fails. When you wear the mask of coldness, you are not necessarily being mean, but you are signaling that you are a man capable of the unthinkable. You are removing the nice guy safety net that others use to justify disrespecting you. Machiavelli knew that a prince who is too approachable or empathetic is a prince who will eventually be stepped upon. By maintaining a distance, a calculated chill, you force others to tread carefully around you. They don't know where your limits are because you don't show pain when they are touched. This uncertainty creates a subtle, underlying dread. They respect you, not because they like your personality, but because they are terrified of what might be lurking behind the mask if they push too far. The internal psychology of this coldness is a form of cognitive dissociation. Thomas Shelby isn't a psychopath. He feels deeply, perhaps more than anyone else in the series, but he has built a bulkhead between his internal state and his external projection. He treats his mind like a war room. When he is under pressure, he moves his consciousness to a place of pure observation. He stops being the person in the fight and starts being the person studying the fight. He views Alfie's screaming not as an insult, but as a data point. He asks himself, why is he screaming now? What is he trying to hide? This shift from feeling to analyzing is what allows him to maintain his sovereignty. To be a Shelby, you must kill the part of yourself that seeks approval. You must become comfortable being the villain in someone else's story, if that is what it takes to maintain your position on the board. In your modern social zadres, you apply this by developing your non-reactivity. Most respect is lost in the first 2 seconds after an insult or a high-pressure question. When a colleague tries to undermine you in front of a group, or a partner tries to bait you into an emotional argument, your instinct is to react. Stop. Freeze the frame. Practice the Shelby stare. Look at the person with completely relaxed facial muscles. Do not squint. Do not clench your jaw. And for the love of God, do not smile to ease the tension. Just look at them as if they are a curious specimen under a microscope. Let their words hang in the air until the silence becomes heavy enough to crush their confidence. In professional negotiations, when someone gives you a low-ball offer, do not argue. Simply look at them coldly and wait. The person who feels the need to speak first to justify the coldness is the person who has lost the leverage. Sovereignty is the ability to remain unmoved while the world screams around you. The third secret to the Shelby crown is strategic unpredictability. Most men are creatures of habit. They take the same route to work, order the same coffee, and react to the same stimuli in the exact same way every single day. This makes them easy to manage, easy to ignore, and easy to defeat. If I know your routine, I own your future. Thomas Shelby, however, is a storm that changes direction the moment you think you've predicted his path. He understands that to be unpredictable is to be untouchable. If no one knows what you are going to do next, no one can prepare a defense against you. You become a variable that cannot be solved, forcing everyone around you to remain in a state of hypervigilance. This tension is the foundation of respect. Consider the intricate, multi-layered game Tommy plays with the Economic League and the Russian aristocrats. On the surface, he appears to be a loyal soldier for the crown, doing the dirty work of the British government. To the Russians, he is a greedy gangster who can be bought with stolen jewelry. But while they are busy putting him in a box, Tommy is already 10 moves ahead. He is digging a literal tunnel into their vault while simultaneously negotiating his own immunity. He leads everyone to believe he is playing their game, only to reveal at the final hour that he has rewritten the rules entirely. He breaks his own patterns, aligns with his enemies, and betrays his allies at the exact moment it is least expected. He is never where they think he is. This level of complexity isn't just about being tricky. It's about refusing to be categorized. The moment people think they have figured you out, your power begins to evaporate. This is the embodiment of Machiavelli's concept of the lion and the fox. In The Prince, he explains that a ruler must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. Most men try to be one or the other. They are either all brute force, the lion, or all quiet manipulation, the fox. Tommy Shelby is both, and he switches between them without warning. One moment, he is the diplomat in a tailored suit, speaking of business and expansion. The next, he is the trench fighter with a razor in his cap, burning down a pub to send a message. Machiavelli argued that the most successful leaders are those who can adapt their nature to the times. If the situation requires a fox, be the fox. If it requires a lion, be the lion. But never let anyone know which one you are until the trap has already sprung. Strategic unpredictability ensures that your enemies are always fighting a ghost. The internal psychology here is about the rejection of the ego identity. The common man is obsessed with being consistent. He wants people to say, "Oh, that's just John. He always does X." He finds comfort in being known. Tommy Shelby finds danger in being known. He treats his personality as a tool, not a prison. He is willing to look weak if it lures an enemy into overextending. He is willing to look crazy if it makes a competitor back down. He has no fixed self that he needs to protect. He is a shapeshifter. This requires a terrifying level of internal discipline because it means you must be willing to be misunderstood. You must be willing to let people think they've beaten you, just so you can observe their next move from the shadows. To apply strategic unpredictability in your daily life, you must start by breaking the habit loops that make you a safe target. If you are always the one who says yes to extra work, say no tomorrow without giving a detailed reason. If you are known for being the loudest person in the room, spend the next 3 days being the quietest. If you usually respond to emails within 5 minutes, wait 5 hours. This isn't about being difficult. It's about resetting the expectations of those around you. When you break your patterns, you reclaim the territory of your own life. You force people to reevaluate their perception of you. In negotiations, change your mind on a minor point at the last second. It signals that you are not desperate for the deal and that you are willing to walk away. In your social circle, don't be the guy who is always available. Be the guy whose presence is a rare, unpredictable event. When you are unpredictable, you are no longer a given in the lives of others. You are a force to be reckoned with. Respect is the tax the world pays to those it cannot control. The fourth pillar of sovereignty is the understanding that in the hierarchy of men, knowledge is the only currency that never devalues. Most men enter a room hoping to be liked. The strategist enters the room knowing exactly why everyone else is there and what they are hiding behind their curated smiles. Information is the raw material of power. Without it, you are navigating a minefield in total darkness. With it, you are the architect of the explosion. Thomas Shelby does not rely on luck, and he certainly does not rely on the honesty of others. He relies on the black book, the gathered secrets, the leveraged vulnerabilities, and the deep intelligence that makes him the most dangerous man in any room, regardless of who holds the official title of authority. Consider the intricate and lethal dance between Thomas Shelby and the towering figure of Winston Churchill. On paper, Churchill is a giant of history, a man who commands the British Empire. Tommy is a gangster from the slums of Small Heath. Yet, when they interact, the power dynamic is jarringly equal, if not tilted in Tommy's favor. Why? Because Tommy possesses the one thing Churchill cannot buy with all the gold in the treasury: information that could topple the government. The Black Book isn't just a collection of names, it is a map of the enemy's soul. When Tommy meets with the Crown's representatives, he isn't pleading for his life or his business, he is presenting a bill for his silence. He understands that a man with a secret is a man with a leash. By the time Tommy walks into a meeting, he has already spent weeks or months mapping the terrain. He knows who is sleeping with whom, who is stealing from the till, and who has a skeleton in their closet that they would kill to keep buried. He doesn't use this information immediately. He stores it, letting it age like fine wine until the moment it can be traded for the highest possible stakes. This is the essence of information leverage. You don't need to be the biggest person in the room if you are the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. This strategic accumulation of intelligence is the modern manifestation of Machiavelli's insistence on the necessity of information and spies. In the 22nd and 23rd chapters of The Prince, Machiavelli discusses the importance of a leader's ministers and how to avoid flatterers. He argues that a prince must be a constant inquirer, a man who seeks the truth even when it is uncomfortable. Machiavelli knew that a leader who is shielded from the truth by those around him is a leader who is already blind. Tommy Shelby acts as his own chief of intelligence. He treats every conversation as an interrogation, every social gathering as a reconnaissance mission. Machiavelli would admire the way Tommy uses the small people, the barmaids, the stable boys, the street urchins, to gather the data that the great men think is beneath them. This is the Machiavellian masterstroke. Understanding that the most valuable information often comes from the shadows, not the spotlight. A prince who does not know his people's secrets cannot rule them. He can only react to them. And as we have established, reaction is the precursor to defeat. The internal psychology of Thomas Shelby regarding information is one of clinical detachment. He views people not as friends or enemies, but as biological data sets. When he looks at a man like Winston Churchill or a rival like Billy Kimber, he isn't seeing a person. He is seeing a series of levers and pulleys. He asks himself, what does this man fear losing the most? What is his blind spot? Most men are blinded by their own ego, which makes them easy to read. Tommy, having suppressed his own ego through the trauma of war and the cold requirements of leadership, is a mirror that reflects nothing. He is the ultimate listener. While others are talking to inflate their own importance, Tommy is silent, absorbing every detail, every tremor in a voice, every flicker of the eyes. He is looking for the structural flaw in the person's character. This is a cold, lonely way to live, but it is the only way to remain a sovereign. You must be willing to see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. In your modern Zadrez social, you apply this by becoming a master of environmental awareness. Stop being the person who walks into a meeting or a party and starts talking about themselves. Instead, become the ghost in the room. Before you ask for a promotion, a favor, or a date, you must map the vulnerabilities of the situation. Who are the decision makers? What are their current pressures? What do they value most? Use open-ended questions to let others reveal their hands. How did you manage to navigate that last crisis? Or, what do you think is the biggest threat to the company right now? People love to talk about their own expertise and their own problems. If you listen closely, they will give you the keys to their own kingdom. In your career, don't just do your job. Understand the politics of the office. Know who holds the real power, not just the title. Collect social capital by solving problems quietly and keeping the details to yourself. When you hold information that others need, respect is the natural byproduct. You don't have to demand it. People will offer it freely in exchange for your cooperation or your silence. This is the leverage of the Black Book. The fifth secret to the Shelby crown is the concept of controlled hostility. There is a profound difference between a man who is loud and a man who is dangerous. The loud man is a spectacle. He shouts, he pounds the table, and he makes a scene to convince himself and others that he has power. This is the behavior of the insecure. The dangerous man, however, is a shadow. He speaks softly. He moves with purpose, and his threats are whispered like a prayer for the dying. He understands that true hostility is most effective when it is concentrated, precise, and entirely unexpected. To command respect, you must cultivate the aura of a man who is capable of extreme violence, be it social, professional, or physical, but who chooses to withhold it. This creates a state of perpetual tension in those around you. They respect you because they are never quite sure when the quiet will end and the storm will begin. Visualize the iconic confrontation where Thomas Shelby stands in the mud of the Birmingham streets, facing the boisterous and colorful Billy Kimber. Kimber arrives with noise, with an army, and with the vulgar confidence of a man who believes his volume is his strength. He mocks Tommy, he laughs, and he tries to intimidate the Peaky Blinders with sheer numbers. Tommy doesn't shout back. He doesn't engage in a verbal boxing match. He stands there, his coat billowing in the wind, and he presents Kimber with a single bullet. He tells him that this bullet has his name on it. He doesn't scream it. He says it with the terrifying calm of a man who has already seen the end of the movie. The hostility is so controlled, so refined, that it bypasses Kimber's ego and strikes directly at his primal fear. The crowd goes silent. In that moment, the power shifts from the man with the most voices to the man with the most focus. Tommy isn't interested in a fight. He is interested in an execution of strategy. By limiting his hostility to a single whispered promise of destruction, he makes the threat feel inevitable rather than negotiable. This is the tactical execution of Machiavelli's chilling advice regarding the surgery of injury. In the third chapter of The Prince, Machiavelli writes that men ought either to be well treated or crushed because they can avenge themselves of lighter injuries, of more serious ones they cannot. Machiavelli understood that half measures in conflict are a recipe for disaster. If you are going to strike, you must strike with such finality that the enemy cannot recover to seek revenge. Tommy Shelby applies this by never making empty threats. If he speaks of a consequence, that consequence is already in motion. Machiavelli would argue that Tommy's quietness is his most effective weapon because it prevents the enemy from preparing an emotional defense. When you shout, the other person's adrenaline spikes, and they prepare to fight. When you whisper, their blood runs cold, and they begin to think. A thinking enemy is a hesitating enemy, and a hesitating enemy is already yours. The internal psychology of controlled hostility is about the total suppression of the fight-or-flight response. When Tommy is threatened, his nervous system doesn't scream. It cools down. He views hostility as a resource, like fuel or ammunition. You don't waste ammunition by firing into the air to make a loud noise. You save it for the one shot that ends the war. To achieve this, you must develop a profound sense of self-worth that is independent of the opinions of others. You don't need to win the argument in the eyes of the onlookers. You only need to achieve your objective. Tommy's quietness is a sign of his absolute certainty. He knows he is dangerous, so he has nothing to prove. This is the ultimate high-status signal. Only the weak feel the need to posture. The strong simply wait for their opening. To apply controlled hostility in your daily life, you must master the art of the low-decibel confrontation. When you are faced with disrespect or an attempt to undermine your authority, do not raise your voice. In fact, lower it. Speak slightly slower than usual. This forces the other person to stop their own noise just to hear what you are saying. It creates a vacuum of power that you fill with your presence. Use short, declarative sentences. Instead of saying, "I really don't appreciate the way you're talking to me right now," say, "Stop. That tone will not be used again." The lack of emotional filler makes the statement feel like an objective law of nature rather than a personal grievance. In professional settings, use surgical feedback. Don't complain about a person's character. Point out the specific failure and the specific consequence with total clinical coldness. When you are forced to act against someone, do it quickly, quietly, and completely. Don't leave room for a round two. People will respect you because they will learn that crossing you doesn't result in a loud argument. It results in a silent, irreversible shift in their reality. This is the lethality of the Shelby whisper. The sixth pillar of sovereignty is the strategic construction of your own indispensability. In the brutal economy of human relationships, being liked is a fragile and fleeting state of grace. To be liked is to be a luxury, and luxuries are the first things discarded when the winter of crisis arrives. To be respected, however, you must become a necessity. You must weave yourself so tightly into the fabric of another person's survival or success that the thought of removing you causes them a phantom pain. You must become the bridge that crosses the chasm, the key that fits the lock, and the only voice that can speak the language of the solution. Thomas Shelby does not seek to be the most popular man in Birmingham. He seeks to be the only man who can keep Birmingham from burning. He makes himself the singular point of failure in the plans of his enemies and the only hope in the lives of his allies. By the time they realize they are trapped in his web, the web has become their only support. Consider the atmosphere of tension and high-stakes political theater during Thomas Shelby's ascent into the halls of the British Parliament. He is surrounded by men who despise him, aristocrats who see his gypsy blood as a stain and his criminal past as a liability. Men like Oswald Mosley look down on him with a curated, venomous disdain. Yet, they cannot simply dispose of him. Why? Because Tommy has mastered the art of the multi-directional leverage. He has positioned himself as the only man who can control the volatile labor unions of the Midlands while simultaneously navigating the shadows of the criminal underworld that the politicians need to suppress. In one particular sequence, where the Crown and the intelligence services are attempting to use him as a pawn against the rise of fascism, Tommy makes it clear that he is the only one with the ground-level intelligence and the street-level muscle to execute their high-level strategies. He doesn't beg for their protection. He reminds them that without him, their elegant plans will be torn apart by the very people they refuse to understand. He forces the most powerful men in the British Empire to treat a bookmaker from Small Heath as an equal because they have no other choice. He has made his presence the only barrier between their order and the coming chaos. This is the living embodiment of Machiavelli's counsel in the 9th chapter of The Prince, where he discusses the civil principality. Machiavelli argues that a wise prince must devise ways by which his citizens will always and in all circumstances have need of the state and of him, and then they will always be faithful to him. This is the gilded cage strategy. If your survival is tied to mine, your loyalty is guaranteed not by your character, but by your self-interest. Machiavelli knew that human nature is fundamentally transactional. A leader who relies on the gratitude of others is building his house on sand, but a leader who relies on the necessity of others is building his fortress on granite. In the world of the Peaky Blinders, Tommy understands that the moment he is no longer needed to solve a problem, he becomes a target. Therefore, he ensures that the problems he solves are never fully extinguished, or that his solution is the only one that doesn't result in total catastrophe. He creates a state of strategic dependence where his enemies must protect him to protect themselves. This is the highest form of Machiavellian sovereignty. To be so vital that your enemies become your bodyguards. The internal psychology of Thomas Shelby is focused on the identification and occupation of bottleneck positions. He looks at a power structure, whether it's a family, a gang, or a government, and he asks, where is the one point through which all the energy must flow? Once he identifies that point, he occupies it. He becomes the gatekeeper. This requires a terrifying level of foresight and a willingness to shoulder immense responsibility. Tommy doesn't just delegate. He holds the master key to every vault. He knows the secret ledgers of the Shelby Company, the hidden agendas of his brothers, and the political weaknesses of his rivals. He internalizes the complexity so that no one else can replicate his role. He is not a team player in the modern, sanitized sense. He is the engine of the team. If the engine stops, the car stops. This is a lonely burden, but it is the only one that guarantees respect. The common man fears responsibility because he fears failure. The man of power embraces responsibility because he knows it is the source of his indispensability. Tommy's coldness comes from the weight of knowing that he is the only one holding the world together. In your modern social zadrez, you apply the aura of indispensability by identifying the unspoken vacuum in your environment. In every office, every social circle, and every relationship, there is a task or a type of knowledge that everyone needs, but no one wants to master. It might be the ability to handle high-stress negotiations, the deep understanding of a complex system, or the emotional discipline to manage a difficult personality. Find that vacuum and fill it. Become the person who just knows how to fix the unfixable. Do not boast about it. Do not offer tutorials. Simply perform. Let the realization of your value dawn on them slowly, through the silence of your efficiency. In your career, don't be a generalist who can be replaced by any other generalist. Be the specialist who holds the institutional memory or the unique skill set that would take years to replace. When the company faces a crisis, you should be the only one they can call. In your personal life, be the rock of sovereignty. The person whose calm and direction are the only things that prevent your circle from descending into drama. When people realize that their lives are objectively better and more stable because of your presence, respect becomes an involuntary response. They will cater to your needs and listen to your words because they cannot afford to lose the solution you provide. You are the architect. They are merely the inhabitants of the world you've built. Respect is not a gift. It is a psychological reaction to the perception of power. Throughout this descent, we have explored the shadows of the mind, the architecture of silence, and the cold calculations of the sovereign. We have seen how Thomas Shelby, guided by the timeless principles of Machiavelli, transformed himself from a broken soldier in the mud of France into the master of an empire. He did not do this by following the rules of the common man. He did it by understanding that the world is divided into two types of people: those who wait for permission to exist, and those who take what is theirs in the dark. Silence is not just the absence of noise. It is the presence of a predator. Coldness is not the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of reaction. Unpredictability is not chaos. It is the ultimate defense. Information is not just data. It is a weapon. Hostility is not just anger. It is a surgical tool. And indispensability is not just being useful. It is being the only air they have to breathe. You now hold the esqueleto, the skeleton of a god. But a skeleton is just bones until you breathe life into it with your actions. From this moment on, your nice guy persona is dead. It was a mask that didn't fit, a lie that didn't serve you. You are now a practitioner of dark psychology, a student of the Shelby way. You will walk into rooms and wait for the space to settle around you. You will look into the eyes of those who try to diminish you, and you will see their fears as clearly as if they were written on their foreheads. You will use your words like a craftsman uses a chisel, sparingly, but with the intent to change the shape of reality. You will no longer seek to be understood or validated. You will seek to be sovereign. The respect you have craved will come, but it won't feel like you expected. It will feel heavy. It will feel quiet. It will feel like power. The challenge is simple, yet most will fail it. Starting tomorrow, choose one of these laws. Apply it with the surgical precision of a man who has nothing to lose and everything to gain. Do not explain yourself to your colleagues, your friends, or your family. When they ask why you are quieter, why you are colder, why you are suddenly the only one who can solve the problem, do not give them an answer. Give them a result. Let the world adjust to the new version of you. The question you must ask yourself every morning is not, who is going to let me, but who is going to stop me? The answer, if you have truly learned the lessons of the Shelby crown, is no one. The world is a chessboard, and for the first time in your life, you are finally seeing the pieces. Move them with intention. Move them with coldness. Move them with the absolute certainty that the game is already won. By order of the Peaky Blinders. I'll see you at the top.